I'm Tori, and today I'm going to be discussing That Inevitable Victorian Thing by E.K. Johnston. This is a really interesting book. It is an alternative history, futuristic book that feels like it's set in the past. So basically the history of this world matches ours up until the reign of Queen Victoria, and then at the end of her reign, which was just at the very turn of the century, just the beginning of the 1900s, instead of passing the throne on to her eldest son, she gave the throne to her eldest child, who was a woman, and since then, kings or queens, it doesn't really matter, the oldest child has just ruled. And also during Queen Victoria's reign, instead of marrying her children off to the great royal families of Europe, which is what actually happened, in this book they have her marrying her children off to the great royal families of the world. So they've married people from China and Africa and all over. So that makes the world of this book really interesting. It is much less sexist than our world. There's almost no racism. People are really open to gay couples. It's very accepting, and it's a little bit in the future. I don't know if in this timeline technology just took off faster or it is some later date in the time, but technology is really advanced. We have all of these robot assistants and stuff, and also for some reason Victorian ideas about propriety and just general approaches to life have stuck around. So they have this technology. When you turn 18, you have a coming out ball, just like you would at in the Victorian era. They still do that. And your genes are then put into a computer anonymously, and you're given a list of all the people who are most likely to produce the healthiest offspring with you. And then you can choose if you want to pursue relationships with those people or just marry whoever you want. And so there still definitely is matchmaking, but it's just kind of done for the best results to make the healthiest children, kind of, and it's not mandatory, it's optional. And also there are still all the Victorian ideas about propriety, so like people don't just date, like they sort of court, and you can court multiple people at once, and then you become engaged, and it's very much like the Victorian way of doing things, much more than dating today. So that makes things very interesting. You still get all, like, it doesn't specifically describe the clothing except to say that the corsets are healthier than the actual Victorian corsets, but I was picturing all still Victorian clothing because that makes this book so much more fun. I was picturing everyone in the big gorgeous gowns with the bustles and all of that. So that's the setup for the world of this story, which is actually much easier to get lost in than you would think from that long description. Like, that sounds very technical, but the world just flows very nicely and it's easy to get lost in it. The actual story follows Princess Victoria Margaret, who is next in line for the throne. She's going to become queen someday, and she wants to have an actual coming out ball and a coming out experience, and the royals are often not allowed to have this because, they get their pick of whoever they want, and they don't get to socialize as much. So she decides to dress as a commoner, or just a noble, really, and she goes by Margaret instead of Victoria Margaret, and she goes to Canada to have a normal coming out experience and just kind of relate to people her own age. So this book is a lot of fun. If you are interested in it at all, I highly recommend that you go read it and then come back to hear what I have to say about it. So I had so much fun with this book. I loved at the beginning when they're all at the cotillion. I loved watching Margaret and Helena and Elizabeth just kind of form a friendship and get to spend time together. And I really liked it that they set it up so that Margaret and Elizabeth think they don't like each other, and instead of doing the bickery girls catfighty thing, they realize that they just didn't get along that well as children, and they like each other now, and they do have a really strong friendship, and I liked that a lot. It faded away, like, Elizabeth is only there at the beginning of the book, and over the course of time she kind of goes on and does her own thing, but it was really nice to see that at the beginning of the book. And then it was really fun to watch Margaret and Helena, of course, and watch their relationship, and watch them become really good friends, and then become something more. And the whole relationship between Margaret and Helena and August was so interesting. I haven't really read that many books that covered polyamorous relationships, and it was really fascinating. I liked their dynamic a lot. I loved watching the characters interact together. There were a couple things that I did not like about the way their relationship was handled, but mostly I just loved watching the characters together because they all worked so well together. So I've only seen polyamorous relationships portrayed in fiction a couple times, and I'm not sure how practical that would actually be in the real world. I've never actually met someone in a polyamorous relationship, so I don't know how well that would work or how practical it would be or how much you would not be jealous of each other. But in this book, it flowed really well, and you could definitely see these characters having an amazing life together. I also thought it was really interesting to see Helena discover that she was intersex, and to have the whole build-up of the conversations. You know, the book has the little conversations at the beginning, and you see someone named Henry Callahan talking, and I'm so bad with names, I just assumed that that was August, because I had forgotten his name already. And so it was interesting to find out that Helena and Margaret have found each other on the website, and so that kind of gives you a heads up, so that when, as soon as Helena logs in, you find out she's Henry, you've already seen all these conversations, and you realize that she and Margaret are going to form a connection, because they have one in real life, so it makes sense that they'd have one on the internet. It was so great to see that. And so when you get to that final scene where they've realized what's happening, and Helena realizes that she is talking to Margaret, you've already seen it play out chapters and chapters ahead of time. You just didn't realize what was going on, so you're so excited for it to happen. And then they find out, and they have that whole afternoon together, and that was just so amazing. It was so much fun and so well written, and just made me feel so happy to watch them together. And it was great how understanding Margaret was, and she's like, oh, by the way, my real name is Victoria Margaret, and I have all the resources of the kingdom at my disposal, so I'll help you figure out what's going on and why you have male DNA even though you look very much like a female, and let's go figure all this out together. And then that chapter ends with them remembering that August exists. And that's my biggest problem with this, is that August and Helena had an understanding and basically knew they were going to get married. And so I think the way that the book wants you to interpret this is that it's Victorian culture. They haven't actually talked about it. They're not engaged, so they're both free to go and be with whoever they want. But it feels like they're in a relationship. They both think they're going to get married. They make out periodically throughout the book. They are in a relationship. And so basically Helena cheated on August. And once she tells him about it, he's completely fine with it. And he has all this guilt because he's been doing all this illegal trading. And so he didn't think he'd get to be with her, and he's just happy that she still wants him, and he doesn't seem to care at all. And that seems incredibly understanding. And I wish they'd handled it a little bit differently. I wish that, Helena and Margaret could still have had a scene where they, express their feelings for each other. But then Helena should have immediately gone to August and said, I'm sorry, I've just realized I have feelings for someone else. And then this whole thing could have worked out the same. He still could have said, oh no, I don't think I get to marry you anyway because of all these trading difficulties. I'm fine with you going and having a relationship with someone else. And then Helena and Margaret could have spent all that time together. There's days and days and scenes of them together, and all of that would have been fine, and she wouldn't have been cheating on August. She would have had his permission, because in the end, they all end up together anyway. And I really just wish August would have been in the loop and been involved earlier, and it would have made everything feel so much more honest and like a kind of a healthier relationship with more open communication. Everything was set up so well, though. They leaked that article to the papers that says, Princess Victoria Margaret has been in Canada, and she's been corresponding with someone who is a perfect genetic match for her. This person is undoubtedly August Callahan, and they're going to get married and have perfect genetic babies. And then it all flows into place so well. Victoria Margaret and August can get married, and Helena, we found out, still has the ability to donate sperm, and so she can actually father Margaret's children, so we still get that great genetic match that will make sure the baby is really healthy and stuff, because apparently that's important in this world. And Helena will have the least high position. She won't be the queen or king, but she'll be a very high lady in waiting, and she will still get to have relationships with both Victoria and August, and so that just works out perfectly. I love that little bit where Margaret is pitching this idea, and she says, in this way we can all get what we want, and August goes, Helena's a who, not a what, and that just is so great. And I think that the three of them will work together really well, because Helena and Margaret definitely are in love with each other and will be a very good couple. Helena and August love each other. I couldn't quite tell if it was platonic or not. Maybe she feels platonically for him, but then he didn't seem overly romantic toward her. They both liked each other a lot, and it could be romantic. So maybe they're just more of a calm kind of love. I don't know. And then August and Margaret also seem really friendly. And there was that one little snippet when they're at the ball, and Margaret talks about her heart kind of leaping when August takes her hand. So I think they will work together really well too. And I think all of this will end up working because they're going into it with that kind of arranged marriage attitude that they kind of got from their parents, because they talk about Victoria Margaret's parents having an arranged marriage, and they had to work really hard to have a good marriage, but they both invested a lot into it and they've had a good relationship. And so I think because all three of these people going into this relationship are planning to work really hard and know it won't be easy, and they really want to have a strong marriage and a strong relationship, that they will all put in the effort and work together really well. And I love just picturing what the rest of their lives are going to be like and what's going to look like when they tell their families. And the ending of this book just left me feeling so optimistic for their futures. So I love this book so much. My one problem with it was that Margaret and Helena did cheat on August, and I really wish they would have handled it differently and that part had been different, but everything else was amazing. The atmosphere was great. I loved that it was both futuristic and Victorian at the same time, and this book was just a delightful, fun little romantic romp.